One of my favorite parts about sports is that there's no such thing as just another game. Sure, after they happen, we can look past many matchups as non-factors, but going in, you literally never know what you could see and how special it may be. An MLB doubleheader on July 12, 1979 proved just that. It was the White Sox, 40-46 coming into the first game, dead in the center of a 3-season stretch where they didn't win more than 75 games any year. This team was not a huge draw for fans. The visiting Detroit Tigers were similarly a couple games below 500. By all proper baseball analysis, this should have been just another game. The White Sox had some promotions going on tonight. Their owner, Bill Veeck, famously did anything he could to put butts in seats, caring more about that than winning games in the opinion of some. Once, when he owned the St. Louis Browns, he let a short person, politically correct term for YouTube, standing at 3 feet 7 inches tall, take an at-bat in an MLB game. Eddie was predictably walked, small strike zone. But tonight there were two entirely different promotions. For one, it was team night, nice and welcoming for the youth. It was also Disco Demolition night.
By the way, who is talking right now? You may not recognize me. My name's Hayden. I run a channel called Hayden without the vowels. I'm making this video on behalf of Raving Sports for a bit of a mutual collaboration between the two of us, but if you guys like what you see, the style or anything, then after you finish, feel free to come on over to my channel. I've got lots more right up this alley, mostly longer stuff if you want a good sports movie to unwind with. I hope you guys enjoy.
Disco music was the fad of all fads, if you'd just be so generous as to allow me to paint the picture. Chicago, the 70s. You can't take 10 steps without kicking a cigarette butt or look 10 feet without a graffitied peace sign. Dodge Darts and Chevy Novas screech by. Guys' hair was long, girls' hair was big, and they all had tight hips. On this specific night in Chi-Town, many of them also seemed to be carrying around loose music records. In the area surrounding Comiskey Park, this should-be routine Thursday night is starting to look unfamiliar. More specifically, there's way too many people here. This is a mid-July White Sox game. We have to be realistic. When they report a sellout 50,000 fans in the stadium, something has to be up. I mean, the White Sox had just finished sweeping the Texas Rangers in a home series over the previous 3 days. None of those games were within even half of tonight's attendance. It turns out the promotion worked a little. Now, Disco Demolition as a whole was the brainchild of a shock jock DJ in the Chicago area, a man named Steve Dahl. Dahl was slowly growing in terms of power and notoriety throughout the Windy City, but it wasn't until Disco Demolition night that the city and the man himself realized just how much influence he had over Chicagoans. And there's one thing about Steve Dahl that everyone knew, the thing that really shot him to fame. The man hated, absolutely despised disco music. Disco had a pretty awesome lifespan. Starting in France and eventually coming on over, the discotheque became a home of exploding colors, up-tempo beats, and absolute vibes. Through the 70s, it blew up as a counterculture movement. It was music you could dance to. It was the Bee Gees, Donna Summer, Casey and the Sunshine Band. But disco wasn't unanimously supported. Its extreme popularity and rise brought haters just as lovers. People thought it was way over-commercialized. It was heavily linked to homosexuality, and the big thing was rock and roll stations were starting to change styles and become disco stations. People were genuinely fearing this was going to push their favorite genre out, and they would be eternally stuck with disco. This takes us right around to the year 1979. Now, Disco Demolition Night is famous, but disco music was so popular that this wasn't even its first introduction to the game of baseball. This very 79 season, the Pittsburgh Pirates, coming off a slow start, got an unexpected boost. The team fully adopted the song We Are Family as their team anthem and lived by it. Parties in the dugouts and on the base path, dudes hyping each other up for various shenanigans, and the catchy tune blasting through every second of empty noise during home games. Pittsburgh rode the multicolored wave all the way to a World Series championship this year, cementing the song in team history and furthermore cementing disco's reputation in MLB lore. Well, not its full reputation. Steve Dahl felt like he was a victim, a casualty of the war between America's newfound disco obsession and the established rock and roll genre. Steve Dahl was a young kid working a DJ gig at a rock station called WDAI. He was there for about 10 months until the entire station changed over to a disco format, and on Christmas Eve, Steve was fired. Eventually, he got back on the air at another rock station called WLUP, The Loop, and he let the world know how he felt about disco music. Steve constantly mocked his old station, referring to them as Disco DIE. He loved making fun of the entire genre, pronouncing the word with a long, sorta homophobic slur. He constantly preached that people had to push back on the ear-punishing dancing sound, and he quite literally, in the most sincere of terms, built an army. Named after a local fish and a local street gang, cause Chicago, the insane Coho Lips were going to prove that they could go toe-to-toe with dozens of third world armies, and there were a frightening amount of them. There was enough that when Steve Dahl, their leader, released a parody song titled Do You Think I'm Disco, it charted number 78 on the Hot 100. With this power, this growing legion of disco haters hanging on every word Steve Dahl had to say, the explosion happened. Well, metaphorical explosion. Oh, no, I guess literal too. The actual specs of the promo were pretty simple, if not hilariously and unnecessarily American. Show up to the White Sox game with a disco record in hand, and you get a ticket for 98 cents, a nod to the Loop's frequency. When you walk into the stadium, drop that record of yours into the big record box, then go watch a baseball game. With a doubleheader scheduled, it was in between games that Steve Dahl would walk on out, take that big box of records, and blow it to smithereens. You want to make baseball more exciting? It's not complicated. Add more explosions to the sport. And according to plan, that whole thing would blow up all the records, then everyone would calmly applaud, maybe a golf clap, patiently watch as the grounds crew clean up the literal crater in the ground, and we'd play a second baseball game like nothing ever happened.
Hello again, everybody. Harry Carey and Jimmy Pearsall from Comiskey Park, where we're going to have a wild night tonight.
The Tigers never trailed. They won 4-1. Nobody scored after the 6th inning. There were no home runs hit. This game is available to watch on YouTube, and even with the packed stadium, it's a long 3 hours. Grass growing or paint drying could be the superior option. In pregame, one announcer does spookily predict a chaotic night.
Between the fireworks, the music, the disco music, the burning of the thing, you know, you're lucky you don't go nuts here. You know, I've been there. I want to tell you, there's a big chance of going nuts. How can you even read the lineup when you can't even think? Right now, there's 30,000 kids, and they got dirty signs all over this park.
The few silly things you notice during the run is the overbearing odor of marijuana, if you can smell it through your phone, along with a shocking amount of signs saying either kill disco, we hate disco, or just something else insanely dirty-minded. The first bad omen was that the big box meant to hold everyone's disco records filled up almost instantly, meaning many fans just brought their record to their seat. Some were thrown on the field. Players vividly described seeing records pierce into the grass, digging in a couple inches, and staying upright. Multiple outfielders did wear batting helmets while outfielding to protect themselves. If you pay real close attention, you can also notice that the fans are mostly young and don't necessarily resemble your typical baseball fan. That is because they weren't. In the bottom of the ninth, a "Disco Sucks" chant slowly began engulfing the stadium. As the field cleared in between games, the show many were really here to see began. But During that first game, even though everyone watching in the ballpark or on TV wasn't excited by much, chaos was already brewing. The White Sox underestimated both the influence of Steve Dahl and the hatred of dancey upbeat music. This game was absolutely packed, every seat and more looked full, but what people inside didn't know is that there were thousands outside doing everything they could to sneak in. Some say tens of thousands, and many of them did get in successfully. There were battles at entrance gates. The stadium sent almost every security guard in the place to the gates to help. Remember that. It eventually ended by security completely shutting off and barricading all but one gate to get in or out from. You can go ahead and remember that too. When Steve Dahl rode on in through the baseball field on a topless Jeep wearing an army outfit with a combat helmet, the crowd really started erupting. They showered the vehicle with beer and even firecrackers. Any records not previously thrown were now being carelessly unleashed. Dahl takes the mic and does his best to hype up the crowd. The box of records is placed in center field and hooked up to some apocalypse-looking movie wires. With the crowd chanting, barely able to contain themselves, Dahl counts up to the ensuing explosion.
1, 2, 3, boom!
Nothing happened. Oh gosh, all these people, they are here for one thing. This is going to be a disaster. You want to talk about a failed promotion? Wait, is that a line of fire? Okay, little boom. Little boom again. Lots of them. This is a little anticlimactic. Holy. Detonating dynamite in a full baseball stadium went about as expected. Shards of records violently flew up to 200 feet in the air. A hole formed in the outfield grass. Smoke sifted through the ballpark, and this all just created the perfect setting, the ideal backdrop for anarchy. As Steve Dahl prances around the field, living in his only ever seconds of rockstarish fame, the broadcast cuts to commercial, but the TV cameras stay on, displaying a perfect wide shot of the field. We can see the grounds crew getting started on cleanups from the detonation. We can see White Sox pitcher Ken Kravitz starting his warm-ups as he was the scheduled pitcher to start the back half of the doubleheader. His teammates watch him from the dugout, now all wearing batting helmets and sheltering themselves into the deepest corners near the clubhouse. And we can hear the crowd start slowly ramping up in a loud cheer. Then you start to notice, hey, there's a lot of people on the field. A couple of them don't look like they belong. And then there's suddenly 100 more people on the field. The camera pans to reveal nothing short of a riot breaking out. Countless people begin scaling the short barriers to break on the field. How is this possible? Well, it was definitely helped by the White Sox security, almost all being focused on the entry gates, leaving minimal presence on the actual field. And once a few people got on and inspired everyone else, no amount of security was stopping anything. Sporting events consistently draw tens of thousands of in-person fans, but that doesn't mean you need tens of thousands of security guards. A couple hundred should do, because in most cases, the crowd is not thinking as one. They can't just overpower you through strength and numbers. But tonight, in Chicago, these fans were working and thinking together. Once you were actually on the field, the next step was different for everyone. It's actually really fun to watch the video and focus in on a random person, just try to get in their headspace for a few seconds. Some simply ran and screamed and skipped around while they got to touch MLB dirt. Some stole whatever they could. Bases were taken, chunks of grass ripped up. One of the announcers saw the White Sox bullpen manager fending off people trying to steal baseball bats by hitting their fingers with a bat of his own. This is pretty chaotic. It quickly became an environment many people would not have felt safe in. If you were just a good Samaritan here for some baseball and now you wanted to leave after what this had become, I understand. It's just, you're probably not going to be able to do that. Because remember, all but one gate were completely shut off, and that one gate had both thousands of people still trying to get in, along with every human who wanted to leave trying to get out. That's a fun traffic jam. So now there were humans climbing flagpoles, many people went arson mode, and began starting mini fires on the field, burning up whatever disco records they could find. All of a sudden, the batting cage was being tossed around the field like a pinwheel. 2 people were actually seen having sex behind second base. Yes, I am serious. The White Sox, desperate to restore order to a now malevolent group of individuals, began flashing, "Please return to your seats" on the scoreboard. They blasted "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" through the whole stadium, which did nothing but provide an impeccable soundtrack to a scene of madness. Eventually, one fire in center field got a lot bigger than the other ones and drew people's attention. Fans danced and sang around the burn, with some jumping through the flames. Around this time, Steve Dahl and his entourage, along with anyone important enough, had been ushered off the field. Players had long barricaded themselves in the clubhouse. Just after 9 o'clock, Chicago riot police arrive, in full gear with shields and pepper spray. Some dispersed. 39 people were arrested this night for disorderly conduct, likely the 39 dumbest and/or slowest field stormers. When the fires were put out and the field cleared, there was no way another baseball game was being played. The stadium grounds were devastated. It was as if a tornado of beer, weed, and teenager violently swept through to mark its territory. So the White Sox, being the home team, were forced to forfeit the game. They were unable to provide acceptable playing conditions. They lost both of them, the Tigers won them both, and the story. This game, in 1979, is the most recent forfeit in the American League. Only one more game has been forfeited across Major League Baseball since. Estimates for how many people were actually able to get into the stadium hover around 60 to 65,000, with most saying another 20 to 30,000 were just outside the stadium. When you look at the lifespan of disco music, how the genre pretty quickly faded out after 1980, a lot of people point to this game as a turning point. And I truly don't think you can underestimate the influence of Disco Demolition Night on the perception of disco music in America. I'm not saying that without this baseball game we would all be hitting discotheques on Friday nights. There was a number of contributing factors to the downfall, but I don't think it's crazy to say this was possibly the biggest factor. And that's why, in retrospect, 50 years later, this random baseball game on a Thursday is still known as the day disco died.
And if we're really still talking about it like this 50 years later, well, is it the worst promotion in baseball history? Or is it the best? That's for you to decide.
Thank you.